Fixing Lost Ark is an interesting topic to tackle for sure. It's mostly the way Lost Ark is built feels flawed to me to begin with. It is based on a progression system that I do not agree with and would like to change. But that would mean changing the entire infrastructure. And this isn't something that I can do in one video, but I'm sure some people like the progressive system Lost Ark has. So let's try to make it better and talk about improvements to the systems that already are in Lost Ark. Let's start with the dailies. I feel like the concept of being able to store dailies is amazing, and I also think that it should be a limit of up to 7 days that it can be stored. But I do not agree with the fact that they are less effective if they are stored. It doesn't make sense to me. It feels like a message contradicting itself. Hey, I think it's cool that you can't log in every day. We want to make it less punishing for you. We understand that you have responsibilities and also don't want to feel like you are falling behind other players with less responsibilities. But at the same time, if you miss these days, you don't get as much as the players with less responsibilities would. Make the efficiency of the stored days 100%, and we can store 7 or 5 dailies worth in them. I definitely think that more players would love this feature than hate it. Sure, the graph that you might show your shareholders might take a turn in terms of daily activity, but one thing for sure that would change is the active player base, which ultimately you should care for if you don't want your priorities to turn to a different game because this one died out. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong and overall active player base isn't more important than temporary player activity. Now let's work on those daily activities a bit further. How about we don't do the same daily activity multiple times? There isn't anything more tedious than doing an activity twice when it could be done once. You're artificially trying to increase the player base's active time within the game where they feel bound by their dailies, instead of reducing it and replacing it with more community-driven activities that can indirectly make you money. A player's mood and mental health does contribute a lot towards the time spent in a game. That is obvious enough. But if the only time they have in a day is spent doing dailies and that causes burnout, why wouldn't they replace Lost Ark with a different MMO or a totally different genre to begin with? Reduce Chaos Dungeons and Guardian raids from 2 entries per day to only 1 and double its rewards. That is the easiest solution to this. Now, while Chaos Dungeons are a bit fun at times and interesting with the random portal mechanic, I feel like we could add something extra to Guardian bosses as well. He could spawn an upgraded version of himself with extra gold or materials, or simply a random chest once you kill him. We need to let players feel like there is a possibility of extra loot just like Chaos Dungeons. Now, let's get into the raiding culture and how to make it better. Having to do raids for an infinite amount of time just for the sake of gold feels like it will already burn out players. Raiding feels good if you can experience the content a limited amount of times in order to achieve something, not an infinite amount of times. For example, think of the amazing title that Helmut Walton and Vikas have, but this is just my personal opinion. We cannot change the way raids are in Lost Ark due to its infrastructure and the need for the raids to be repeatable. However, we can make them more tolerable. Let's make it so that people can select one character to get 6 times the awards for that week instead of having to do it on 6 other characters for the sake of it. This can obviously be an option for those who don't want to play on other alts. However, I'm aware that this might bring up a lot of problems where there won't be enough people for everyone to even attempt the raids. So I propose a little tweak. We can choose to do it on one character, but at the same time, multiple clears will not give us gold, but tokens that we can use in a shop or a few extra bound materials. The materials won't be in a large enough of a quantity to make it feel worth it for people to farm on all of their characters, but it will be a reward for those who want to try and teach newbies more about the raids. The problem might also be the fact that this opens up more possibilities for buses. But let's be serious, those that wanted to do busing are already doing it. And those that don't do busing think that it is too big of a pain in the ass to begin with, so they won't change their mind about it. In my opinion, the raid mechanics don't have the mentality that they should. The human mind sees a loss way more stressful than a gain. Let's portray this scenario. There is a mechanic that if failed, wipes half of the party after 10 minutes of stressful and near perfect gameplay. And if it succeeds, you gain nothing, you just get to continue the raid. That would leave a sour taste in the mouth of everyone. Now, let's replace some of these mechanics with ones that don't wipe half of the party. A mechanic that if succeeded, grants a whole party buff for the remainder of the fight, which makes the raid easier. However, if failed, it halves everyone's HP and the buff isn't granted, and thus continuing the raid that you've been playing perfectly up until now. So see how here, making one mistake doesn't end up in a bad taste in your mouth and 10 minutes of wasted time, but rather just an opportunity wasted. But everything continues as it should have. I agree that some raids need to have difficult mechanics to perform, but I can also agree that the same mechanic given to 8 people in hopes of everyone playing perfectly every single time isn't the way to go. Difficult mechanics all around that chunk the HP of players if failed seem much more fun due to the HP potion limit than mechanics that wipe everyone for one mistake. The point behind this idea is to make mechanics that reward you instead of punish you. I'm not saying all of them should be like this, because we need difficult raids, but just by tweaking the difficulty and the overall perspective that we see raids from, we can slowly get rid of the gatekeeping aspect of the game. I also have to touch upon one aspect of raiding, and that aspect is related to classes. Support classes to be more specific. We need to make support classes feel more enjoyable to play. In order to do that, we need to give them more satisfaction. Support players need to see how much damage their shield absorbed on an ally. For example, if an ally takes damage while one of your shields is on, you could see a small pop-up above their head with a number that is absorbed. They also need to know how big of an effect their buffs have. For example, what if an ally has our damage buff? You could see a small number that indicates the damage buff you have given him. We already have damage numbers when we hit bosses in the game. We could instead have different colored numbers showing on the boss indicating the extra damage that our allies are doing with our own damage buff active. I also feel like a more detailed contribution screen at the end of the raid is beneficial. Things like total extra damage provided, damage shielded or healed. Now that support players have been given the satisfaction they need, we need to also make it more enjoyable for them to play it. Give supports interactive skills that can actually save allies in the face of death. Let me explain. A paladin could easily have a skill that redirects all the damage one of his allies takes for a few seconds, or even a portion of it. Aeon, for example, had a skill like that for Templars, and it was called Bodyguard. A Bard can have a Guardian Angel skill that makes one of his teammates immune to all damage for a shorter period of time than the Paladin, since the Paladin actually takes the damage himself. Artists have already a Gate skill, which can teleport allies. What if instead we could teleport an ally instantly to us in order for them to avoid certain death? Something like Final Fantasy. This could be a super fun skill to be used when you see an ally stun locked or in a bad position. These are just a few examples of how to make supports more fun to play. I know the game wasn't intended in the beginning to have a support class, but the way raids are going and the amount of chip damage we have in the game, supports are a must, and increasing the number of support classes and players by providing more satisfaction and fun gameplay would help the game tremendously. You wouldn't take 1 or 2 hours in a party search to find a support anymore if you're an item level. When it comes to lower item level raids, give a party buff to every single party that has a Mokoko player in it. This way it makes up for the idea that the player will not amount to much, and it's an incentive to accept more new players into raids, and it will give them the experience they need. Now that we got raids sorted, I would like to talk about the preparation before raids and how we can improve those systems. By preparation, I of course mean engraving and enhancing. When it comes to engravings, there are way too many useless ones in the game. We already know the top engravings, and anything else is so bad it's actually seen as troll to even have them. But coming up with different engraving ideas that can fit different playstyles is what the devs should aim towards. Players get excited coming up with different fun but also useful builds, and I just feel like the engraving system right now is wasted potential. Now, when I talk about enhancing, even though I hate RNG enhancing, I do have to admit that Lost Ark tried to make it as forgiving as possible, and removing it would cause unpredictable damage or benefits to the game, so I only have one fix for it. Just make it easier to enhance. Right now it takes too many clicks and animation cancelling. Some people might just want to attempt 5 times in a row and hope for the best instead of clicking 5 times and also trying to cancel it or waiting the full animation. Make it less painful to enhance. That's it. Now, before we end, I would like to propose a few ideas for the community. But before that, let's talk about an easy fix for Guardian raids. Now, this might come as a surprise to some of you, and it might also shock you, but just give them health bars. And the last one would be to remove flares from the game and the ability to not see Guardian raids. Yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. I feel like the bosses are fun, we just have to do them way less, and actually not having to put an item in the game that serves no use but for a mechanic that we created that benefits the players with nothing. Moving on. The community needs to be less centric about raids. Raiding is amazing in Lost Ark, in the right conditions, but raiding doesn't keep everyone in the game. We need more community bonding activities. Let's give the community a system to make custom islands and modes or custom raids with fun mechanics. Think of fun community events revolved around a fashion show, Or let's think about a weaker Clown and Valtan in the same small arena. Last but not least, server merges, or well, even regions sometimes. Lost Ark opened a lot of servers in the beginning when the population was more than 1 million players. Well, currently the average is in between 30 to 50,000 players. And that's between 2 different regions, or well, 3 with West Europe, with multiple servers. If we want a tighter community, we need to be more compact and gathered around the same place rather than split apart. Lost Ark has potential. The PvE combat and raiding feels amazing. It's definitely one of the better MMOs out there when it comes to the raiding experience. But the community and overall feeling of the game turns me and other players away from the game. And hopefully, the fixes that I have brought today might just be what Lost Ark needs to make a comeback. If you don't think that, then let a comment down below and let me know about your opinion. I would love to see it. But what do you think? Are these really the things that Lost Ark needs to make a comeback? Or can Lost Ark even make a comeback to begin with? Have players really made up their mind about the game? I ask you, my dear viewer, how would you fix Lost Ark?